Welcome back to another UNC football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, our channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, Miss Deana King, the one and only Deana King, who's ascended to rock star status of late because of her amazing work for us here at THI. And Deana, this podcast, we're going to focus on how strong the defensive class is for UNC. Carolina fans for a while have been kind of used to the program racking up, some pretty noteworthy offensive skill guys. Certainly that was something Larry Fedora's program did pretty well. And early on there was sort of a lot of chatter about offensive skill guys. Well, the fans are saying we need to get defensive guys. To win championships, you got to be able to stop the other team every once in a while. So what we've seen now is that Carolina has received 8 commitments since the shutdown started, and 5 of those kids are defensive players. So, and the whole Boykins factor could change that even as well. So what we're seeing is defensive kids, highly regarded defensive kids, going to the program. In fact, of the 17 commitments in the class, 10 of them are 4-star kids, 1 is a 5-star. 6 of those 4 stars are defensive kids. One of them, the 5-star kid, is also a defensive player. So 7 of the top 11 kids that are 4 and 5 stars in this class are defensive kids.
Well, Andrew, you hit on it. Mack's teams in the 90s, right before he left to go to Texas, they were just known to have outstanding defensive talent, especially they're on the defensive front at linebacker, DB. They were just loaded, and Mack is bringing his same recipe that he made the Tar Heels so great in his first stint as the head coach of the Tar Heels.
Yeah, when you go back to the 96 and 97 teams, his last 2 in Chapel Hill during his first stint, those were teams that both finished ranked in the top 10. And while they were good offensively, and at times they were dynamic offensively, they were great defensively. You could argue the 96 team was perhaps the best defensive team in the country. They held an extremely potent Florida State team to around 211 yards in Tallahassee. The next year, that defense had 3 guys taken in the first round, and they had other guys from that defense that ended up playing a long time in the NFL. Dre Bly was on that defense, for example. He didn't come out until later. So when you think about the way Mack did it back then, there was this sideline to sideline thing. I'll never forget Mike Godfrey talking about sideline to sideline football and defense, where that was how things changed in the 90s. And Florida State was one of the first programs to have dudes that can go from one sideline to the other and make plays. Well, Mack sort of patterned the way they built the defense around that, and it worked. Now we look at Jay Bateman's defense and how he wants very rangy dudes that can move around, that can put all around the field, and guys that go sideline to sideline. And we're seeing that with a lot of these athletes that they're getting. They're getting real quality players, but they're getting kids that when they get there, they could go in a couple of different directions defensively. I know you've talked a lot about Ra Dilworth. He's a kid that can end up in any number of spots, and that's the kind of rangy sideline to sideline athlete they're going after, and they're getting a lot of those kids.
It's actually hard to put them in a set position. I know a lot of people get on the internet and we had Gabe Stevens at DB, and people look at the rankings and say, oh, he's going to be a linebacker and blah blah blah. But the kids that Coach Bateman and Coach Brown, all the staff have brought in, you just can't. You don't know where they're going to be put. They're such athletes. You mentioned Ra, Gabe Stevens, he can play a lot of places. Boykins can play offense and defense. I think Caleb Hood can play offense and defense. Dontavius Nash, versatile there. So just a lot of options. We like the word options. Mack's got options. Bateman's got options there on the defense. And, that DE linebacker hybrid that, I don't know, we need to give that a special name because it's just We just call it hybrid. We need a unique name for it. I need to suggest that to Bateman, since
Well,
that's the most talked about position on the team.
yeah, but when you bring it up to him and you call it the hybrid linebacker defensive end position, he'll kind of joke and say linebacker, defensive end, linebacker. So I think he gets a kick out of the fact that we don't really know what the heck to call it, because it's both. Guys line up doing both. In fact, the next kid that may well pop for the Tar Heels, George Wilson, I talked to him last weekend about that. And, he's an offensive end, and he's played most of his high school career with a hand on the ground, but he loves the fact that spot that they're recruiting him for is the same thing that they recruited Desmond Evans for. And there's similarities when you look at the physique of both kids. He loves it because a lot of it's a stand-up stuff. A lot of it's outside linebacker. But he's also calling it defensive end. So he doesn't really even know 100% what that position's called. And I think that's what excites a lot of Carolina fans, because the uniqueness of this defense and the fact that when they eventually get all these dudes in school and they spend time with the strength and conditioning staff and they're ready to get on the field and get meaningful snaps, they're going to be the kind of athletes that fit that vision perfectly. And we're seeing it slowly come into reality, come into fruition. And I think that's what's really neat in watching the recruiting right now. A lot of people get fixated on the star rankings, even the 757, which we're going to do a podcast on later about how Carolina's really starting to make some inroads in the 757. They're fixated on where kids are from. But look at them now and envision them down the road. And like you said, options are a great thing in life. No matter what you're doing in life, options are an awesome thing. And these kids are going to get to school, and these coaches are going to have a lot of options of what they're going to do with them. And that's how you become a program that hits the next level and stays at that next level. And that's obviously the mission here.
And going back to Mack, he has always had a great intuition about putting kids where they can excel the best. They may recruit them as one position, and it might not work out at that position, and he decides he could play this. And we've seen it time and time that sometimes Carolina's had a great history of recruiting quarterbacks and turning them into linebackers and stuff like Quan Sturdivant and Bruce Carter. Now we see Chaz Surratt doing that. So it's just credit to the staff that they can just take a kid and mold them where they want him.
Well, they've got a few more spots left in this class, and we're not going to dive into the rest of 2021 in this specific podcast. We do know they want a defensive lineman. They want a kid who's comfortable in a 4-point stance and who can, shoot the gap and occupy multiple blockers. So he's probably not going to be a guy that comes in and they look at him in a couple different spots. So he's going to get sent to that defensive interior line group and anchor there. We don't know who that's going to be just yet. But they're still looking at more athletes. Like I said about George Wilson, Bryson Nesbitt's a kid that, he's got, real talented tight end written all over him. But in the way football is right now, you just never know with some of these kids. So the thing I've really enjoyed about seeing some of these kids up close and really peeling the layers away the last few months on recruiting is we really do get to see the types of athletes that this staff wants in there. And a lot of these kids play other sports. Desmond Evans, real good basketball player. Wilson actually started as a basketball player. You hear them talk about Kevin Hester and the kind of improvement he made once he got into the program last year. They love those rangy guys, and they're going to keep bringing them in.
Multi-sport kids, you see coaches say all the time that they want kids that are multi-sport. I think it helps them. When you can get some basketball players that are offensive linemen, that's a big plus. And Nesbitt is a basketball player. Drake May is a basketball player. So, it always helps to be always involved in sports. I think that's a big plus in the sporting world today.
Caden Baker, who's a true freshman now, he was a really good, really solid basketball player in high school down in Florida. So He's another example. She's Deana King. I'm Andrew Jones. You've been listening to another UNC football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com and Tar Heel Illustrated on YouTube. Make sure you check us out at TarHeelIllustrated.com for just $8.33 a month. You can have access to absolutely everything we do on our site. Thanks for stopping by.